Hey, welcome back to this week's episode of Closed by Mo. My name is Mohammed. I'm hopefully your favorite YouTube host on most things real estate, at least hopefully your favorite YouTube host in New York. I'm also a real estate investor and a realtor based out of New York City. This week's episode, we're actually not going to be talking about any kind of real estate investment related advice, but we're going to be talking about something that's a little bit more relevant to retail buyers and retail sellers. It's people that own their own homes and might not have as many investment properties, but of course, it can still apply to real estate investors too. I'm talking about deed fraud. Yes, deed fraud. This is one of the things that really upsets me, and it gets me very irked up and really grinds my gears, because you can have someone that has worked their whole life to buy their own property and finally achieve their version of the American dream, to have scammers come and pull the rug from under them and steal their property. You might be wondering, how does this even work? Rest assured, we're going to be talking about it in this week's episode, so I hope you guys enjoy it. Let's jump right into this. Now, to understand how deed fraud actually happens, you have to first understand exactly what deed fraud is, right? So basically, let's say you own a property, you have your information written on the deed or the title as the rightful owner. What will effectively happen is the fraudster or the scammer will transfer the ownership of that property, will transfer that title over to their name without consent from you, or they might even basically sell that property from under you if they're able to impersonate you. The way they're able to do that is they'll typically go after and target homes or owners that have a lot of equity already built into it, or they actually own their house outright. Because when they're doing that fraudulent activity of transferring the title over to their name, it usually triggers a reaction of the bank, if there is a bank on that title itself, if there's like a mortgage on the note, because then the bank will be aware that someone had sold that property, and the bank will of course come knocking on the door because they want their money. But if they see that a transfer has happened but they haven't gotten their money, they're going to start raising questions, which might in turn alert you, the original homeowner, that hey, someone's been messing with the title report. Now, how does deed fraud actually happen precisely? There's a couple of different ways, right? One of the more common ways is what we call forged deeds. Literally, fraudsters will basically try and create fake documents, and they'll forge your signature of you if you're the property owner or the original property owner, to try and transfer the property ownership records over to their name. So they'll basically just pretend to be you, which is the second way of conducting deed fraud. They'll just have a false identity, right? They'll steal your personal information, social security, ID, all that fun stuff, any verification things that they need to be able to do to show that they are you, they will absolutely do. And what they'll try and do once they have pretended to be you is they'll try to transfer the ownership of that property over to their original name or someone else's name, whatever it is, to see if they can make a quick buck. And of course, one of the other ways that they can also do this is just through property record manipulation, right? So if your local county or your local town, whatever it is, have had data breaches or any kind of hacks that have happened, because I know this has happened in Nassau County too, what the hackers will basically try and do is through unauthorized access into the property data records, is they'll try and transfer that ownership information to them, or they'll just try and sell the property outright. Now, the common theme here is that the deed is being transferred over to someone else that's not the rightful owner, which is very scammy, I understand, but the more you educate yourself, you'll be able to figure out how to prevent these things from happening. And the best way to protect yourself from any kind of deed fraud is a couple of different things, right? Number one, make sure you monitor all of your property records. Make sure you're understanding, like you're looking at your credit score, you're looking at your social security number, making sure that there's no identity theft alerts, things like that. A lot of credit card companies will now offer free identity monitoring. You have to be very vigilant about those things, because if you own property and your information is on the dark web or someone else has access to it, then they could hypothetically use that against you, pretend to be you, and transfer the ownership record of that property over to someone else's name or to their own name. The second way you can protect yourself is purchase title insurance, right? Title insurance usually costs anywhere from 0.5% to 1% of the overall purchase price of the property, and it's basically like an insurance against making sure that if anything were to happen, if let's say the title records or the ownership record is skewed, or there's some mismatch of information because of deed fraud or because they just didn't have proper property records, then you would at least be compensated for that. The third way to protect yourself is just be smart, right? Guard your personal information. Don't be giving out your social security numbers. Don't be giving out your identification, your addresses just to everywhere, willy and nilly, and everywhere online as well. You have to be very careful, because a lot of times what will happen is that information might get accessed by the wrong parties, or it might get sold on the dark web, and then people will start to see what kind of deeds and what kind of scams and frauds they can pull off on you. Of course, also make sure you talk with legal professionals to understand how you can protect yourself from any kind of deed fraud. Sometimes it might make sense to put the property under like a trust or a beneficiary or some kind of entity to give yourself an extra layer of protection against that. And of course, if you do see any kind of suspicious activity on the title or even in your identity, you have to make sure you report that immediately, because that way you can then protect yourself from making sure that the deed fraud does not happen to you. God forbid you run into a situation where the fraudsters transfer the property owner to their name, the ownership to their name, and they come after you and say, hey, you're living in the property illegally, right? So you want to make sure that that definitely doesn't happen to you. I hope you guys definitely enjoyed this video and at least learned something about what deed fraud is and how you can better protect yourself from these kinds of situations, because it definitely is something that surprises me that it happens in such a developed country like America, let alone in a city like New York. I hope you guys enjoy this video. I'll see you guys next week.